the idea that we live and we are still oppressed by the patriarchy is as alive now as it was 7, 8 years ago when I was starting. So, can you tell us about what you understand as patriarchy nowadays? And what do you think about women essentially being oppressed by all these evil men?
Well, my mum is probably the most formative person in my life. She grew up in Zimbabwe and saw the horrors of real oppression by the hands of Robert Mugabe, a tyrant who murdered countless people. And she drilled it into me from a very young age that I have it great in this country. I'm not oppressed. No one's oppressed in this country. Women aren't oppressed. Men aren't oppressed in the UK today. And I think that's true. I feel like we should be extremely grateful for how good we have it. Not just we have it better than pretty much anyone in the world, but anyone in the world at any point in history. So personally, I think like the word oppression is not something you'll find on my page to describe either men or women in the UK. And yeah, patriarchy, the etymology of that word literally means father, patriarchy, dominator. So father dominator, the ruler of the family, essentially is what it's saying. And it goes back to a time when the dad was the sort of figurehead of the family, and he called the shots and he decided what happens. But in the UK today, I mean, fathers don't even have equal rights to their own children. So I struggle to understand how someone could be the so-called ruler of the family whilst not having actual rights to his own child, which is probably the most important thing in his life. And if you honestly think fathers are the ruler of the family in the UK, you should. I encourage you to spend maybe a week or so outside a family court, and you'll see how many destroyed, disempowered men, fathers there are. So I don't know. I don't think it's the best way to view the world. I think it's inherently ungrateful and narrow-minded. And although there are some elements of so-called male power, there are also female power. So men often hold positions of hard power, but not always, and less so today. Hard power meaning political leadership, for example, whereas women have more soft power. Women have more influence. So it's really swings and roundabouts. And there are certain places, certain industries that are dominated by men, but then there are industries that are dominated by women. So like the family court system, the psychological system, the educational system, the third sector, the charity sector, the domestic violence industry, especially, we're talking 95%, 96%, 97% women. They're not patriarchal. They're the opposite, if anything. So it's not that I deny any sort of semblance of a patriarchy. It's more that I think there are better ways of viewing the world today, more inclusive ones that recognize how men are hurt, men and boys are hurt, as well as women and girls. And the patriarchy for me is just a big sort of very vague ideological bogeyman that is terrifying, but really it's very difficult to observe and even more difficult to describe. So it's not a scientific concept that I think is helpful, and increasingly less helpful every single year. So yeah, I mean,
I think
you talked
that
about being a woman in business. I mean, did you know like 40% of new businesses are owned by women? So I mean, it's let go of this. We need to let go of this idea that women are oppressed and incapable, and start to notice that women are actually doing amazing things already.
To be honest with you, it was actually in that industry where I really started paying attention to what's actually happening in the culture, because I saw the huge gap between essentially the most free and independent of, for example, a man's finances, let's say, women that were the loudest about the idea of living in this oppressed patriarchy and somehow not having opportunities to start businesses. To me, that was it was really clashing with reality. So I started like looking at certain narratives that are being fed, and I do think that they are being fed because there is rarely ever an original conversation being done about it. Most people that will post something online, it's like regurgitated stuff that they've heard elsewhere. But the really interesting thing about the oppression that you touched upon, I come from Poland, so um,
Mm,
if you can voice your opinion and voice your protest about something that you are not happy with, you're not oppressed. The countries
mm,
that are honestly oppressing people, you just simply can't do that. If you do, you're either arrested, killed, you face serious prosecutions. So the whole idea, I think, around the oppression and patriarchy particularly. I actually like your idea that, let's leave oppression aside, but the patriarchy just became this buzzword that really doesn't mean what it used to mean anymore. And it was almost like a term that was hijacked, but it's still fed to young women. And I think it's to disadvantage of both sexes.
I think the actual concept of the patriarchy is what's oppressive. Like the belief in the patriarchy is what is oppressing women. Like women and young girls being told that you're being oppressed by your male peers. You're going to be, your entire life is going to be a struggle against the patriarchy. Men are going to control you through fear and acts of violence. So those concepts are what is oppressive and terrifying to women. People constantly ask me, well, how do we make women feel safe? And I'm like, how about you stop pretending that half the world's population is out to oppress you through physical violence? That'd be a great way of helping women feel a little bit more safe. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's the belief in the patriarchy that I find is particularly damaging and terrifying and dehumanizing for boys and terrifying for girls and mostly unhelpful.
And I think
But I mean, I'm
another
a white
another
man, so I would say that.
yeah, you're
Typical.
privileged white
Someone's gonna.
man.
I'm just sort of reading the mind of some of the people watching this, and they're like, "Oh my god, he's," and I'm straight. So I mean, bloody hell. I mean,
You've got
but
you've got it
yeah, it
all
doesn't. It,
stacked against you, George.